Welcome back, everybody, to Echoes from Abroad, a segment where we interview guests and friends from across the globe to get their perspectives on politics in their home country and how that parallels or intersects with American politics and just the overall state of global discourse going on right now. So, our guest today is a friend of Tommy's from Germany. Ola, how are you doing today? Thank you so much for coming on.
Hey, I'm fine. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. Uh, yeah, so I guess just kind of like kick it off. In a couple of days, we're going to be certifying our 2024 presidential election. The interesting thing is the losing candidate is going to preside over the certification of her
Of
competitor
the
who won
her loss, her election
of
loss.
her loss. Yeah. And, in a couple of weeks after that, we're going to be swearing in, Donald Trump, who will be returning to power as the 47th president of the United States. Our election cycles are extremely long, especially presidential ones. I mean, over a year, sometimes a year and a half, depending on who the candidate is or what the message or state of the country is. And I was just curious how that parallels to German politics and your guys' presidential elections and how that works.
Well, it's quite different. So in general, to maybe start off for everyone who doesn't know too much about Germany, basically the Allied forces after the Second World War designed our democracy. It's a parliamentary democracy, and I like to say that they improved upon the things that they thought uh, could be improved upon in the American democracy, but it's very very close in many aspects, as in federal system and so on. Um, about the presidential election, that's actually fairly different here. So the president in Germany doesn't really have that much power, and therefore, yeah, it's not really interesting to learn about how he or she gets into office. Basically, the president is voted into office by the parliament, not by the people themselves. Um, we don't have an electoral college or anything like that. So we just vote for the parties that we want, and they then vote for the president. In Germany, the important politician that you would probably see as an equivalent to the president in the United States would be the chancellor. Um, yeah, and there the process is pretty much the same. So the parliament votes for the chancellor, but yeah, obviously, most of the time the chancellor is going to be the leading candidate of the party that had the most votes. Right? That's how it usually goes.
So to
As in, yeah, sorry.
sorry, keep going.
As for the time frame, it's definitely much shorter. Um, Funny enough, we're also about to have a new election again in Germany, which came sooner than expected. So the current government split up, and therefore we will have a new election in February. And yeah, usually after the election in Germany, we have many different parties. So usually we have somewhere between 5 to 7 parties that end up in the parliament. And then pretty much every single time since the beginning of the Federal Republic of Germany, there will be a coalition, meaning several different parties, 2 or 3, will have to come together, agree on a contract for a coalition, what they will vote for together, what they will try to pass. And that coalition will need some time to find itself, right? So that's basically, yeah, the bigger chunk of time that is being consumed after the election. So that might end up taking 2 or 3 months, and after that we would have a functional government, and they would also then know who the chancellor is. So I expect us to have a new chancellor, new government, maybe by June, I would say.
So if I'm gathering this correctly, and I don't know how much attention you pay to our legislature, The chancellor is kind of like the equivalent of our Speaker of the House, except it would be as if the Speaker of the House is the country's leader, and then your head of state is more a figurehead. So it's like it's like basically giving executive power to our Speaker of the House, but head of state would still be there as a figurehead. Does that sound correct?
Not 100%. So the president here still has a political power, as in the president is the one who signs laws, right? So the parliament passes a law, but it does not come into effect until the president actually signs it. 99.9% of the time, that's just a formal act. There has been very few times where the president in German history did not sign a law because it was just against his, and I can say his because it was only men, against his opinion. The chancellor does actually have some other privileges or ways to force certain decisions or certain policies. And at the end of the day, for example, one privilege that our chancellor has that you might maybe suspect a president to have would be being supreme leader in case of a war. So if we go to war, then the supreme leader will not be our minister of defense, which is the supreme leader during peacetime, but during wartime, the German chancellor will take over that position. So there are some political powers the chancellor has, but I wouldn't quite compare it to the Speaker of the House if I'm informed correctly on what the Speaker of the House does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So do you have an upper and lower house legislature?
No. So, like I said, we do have a federal system as well. So Germany is divided into 16 different states. They have their state parliament, and then we've got one federal parliament. And then we also have another institution. So the German parliament is called Bundestag, and the other institution is called the Bundesrat. That is basically a second line of defense that every law has, or most laws have to go through. It consists of one member from every German state. So you don't only have the popular the popular representation of the parliament, but also ignoring the different population sizes of the different states. Each state has one seat in the Bundesrat, meaning that even smaller states can use their veto to block certain things. There are certain laws that need the acceptance by all 16 states, and then you could, for example, block those if one state says no, sorry, but this is just not what we want on a federal level. It usually is the prime minister of the state who is in that Bundesrat, I believe.
Yeah, that sounds like our House of Representatives and our U.S. Senate.
Or Senate.
Yeah. So kind of what he kind of meant. But you said in that in that second chamber of the 16, you said usually it's the you said the prime minister of each state institution, or what was the term?
Yeah, I think so. I would have to Google it, actually. I'm not 100% sure, but basically every state has their own government as well. So the different parties that form different coalitions, and that's currently a really interesting, exciting, I'm not sure what word to use, time, because on a federal level, currently there are already talks, right, about who a party could imagine forming a coalition with and who they just couldn't. And it's interesting since, for example, some conservatives say, hey, we cannot imagine working with the Green Party on a federal level, but in several German states, the Conservative Party is in a coalition with the Green Party and quite successful. And their conservatives even say, hey, it's working really well. Don't categorically just deny it. But basically every state has their own parliament, state government. I don't know if the government is the right word then. Yeah, but that also means that they have a prime minister on a state level. Yeah.
And that prime minister on that state level is who serves at the federal level.
No, actually, it's split from or not
Okay.
split, but it's there's a hard cut between the state level and the federal level. So
Okay.
actually, we do have a very prominent prime minister in Bavaria. He has very high popularity there. He's like Bavaria first, and a lot of people like what he says in Bavaria, but outside of Bavaria, he's not that popular. And so far at least, he's pretty much only sticking to the state politics of Bavaria because he can't really lose there. He's, quite successful there. And I think he knows that if he switched to federal politics, he can only lose compared to his current situation, right? Because he would have to make compromises and so on and so on. And so he instead stays on the state level and doesn't really get into federal politics. Obviously, he goes on talk shows every week and complains about federal policy, but he's not really an active part of it.
Okay. Just
So I
I
think
just thought I heard you say that whoever was on the state level represents in that the 16 member chamber at the federal
Yeah,
level.
okay, sorry. Yeah, right. So that's correct. But they're not at the same time a member of the federal parliament, the Bundestag. So if they run for the state parliament, they do not at the same time run for the federal parliament.
okay. So I think the figure I'm most familiar with from German politics is Angela Merkel, of course. Could you just kind of tell us about her, like how prominent she was, and she was prominent for a very long time, and then kind of her interactions with Trump, and then finally, could you tell us about her departure?
Yes. So, I mean, Chancellor Merkel was the chancellor for, I believe it was 16 years, which translates into 4 legislation periods. How do you call it? Yeah. Um,
Cycles, yeah.
yeah, cycles. So that's quite long. She she had very high popularity during her 16 years. Obviously, there were some ups and downs, but overall, compared to other chancellors, she was very, very popular in Germany, which I believe also led to the success of the Conservative Party throughout many years. As soon as she left, the Conservative Party dropped in polls dramatically, which is two different reasons as well. But in general, she was very popular. Now that she's gone, I believe more and more people are starting to see the effects of her policy in the long term, or from a long term perspective. Um, yeah, while she was in office, most Germans liked her. I believe she topped out around like 70+% popularity, which is insane for a chancellor. Um, yeah, but today there's quite some criticism about her because she did, well, pretty much force a lot of policies. She really had the Conservative Party in her hands. She cut off everyone who could possibly be a successor to her within the Conservative Party, which she is now criticized for because the Conservative Party today, personal opinion, has no figure standing out. Like all of their candidates that they could potentially bring up for the position of a chancellor, they're a joke. Sorry, it's I'm they're not statesmen or stateswomen. They they just lack that. I don't know how to phrase it. Um, it seems they only serve their own interests, and while you don't have to agree with what Dr. Merkel did, I believe that she really did it because she thought it was the best for the country, and not for herself. She's also one of the only politicians that I'm aware of that never had any scandals concerning being bribed or being a lobbyist or anything like that. So it seems to me that, yeah, no one has ever found anything that she has really done wrong in that sense, where she misused her power or anything, which is very common among other politicians, unfortunately. As to her, political career, I like to differentiate between her foreign policy and the German policies. So outside of Germany, I think she has done an amazing job. She really managed to, well, she tried to keep us out of many conflicts. She also was very good at keeping people and nations together, within Europe, obviously, together with the French and so on, but also beyond Europe. I think she really was a chancellor who knew we have to work together in this world. It's Everything is globalized. We can't think as just Germany or just Europe, and the only way forward can be cooperation and peace. When it comes to German policies, I think it's a little more complicated. Um, while she did pass some very liberal laws, which she was criticized heavily for among conservatives, like allowing gay marriage. There are also parts where you just have to criticize her for example, still sticking to the heavy reliance on Russian energy. So the heavy dependency on Russian energy is one of the things that came out of her policy, and I think that's, as we say in Germany, that's a hat she has to put on her head. So it's just what she's responsible for. So yeah, well, there are things you can criticize her for. Obviously, the one of the most prominent topics that is being discussed in recent times is her migration policy. Noticeably, the refugee crisis from 2015, 2016, when I think over 1 million Syrian refugees came to Germany. She said we can do it, and that we should let everyone in who needs help. But many people criticize her for it. I believe it's a fairly similar discussion to what many countries have, the US as well, I think. So obviously those are topics that many people now say, hey, that wasn't right. We now have to deal with the consequences. But then again, many people also just want to blame stuff on others, because they don't want to question their own choices. So, or avoid work, but maybe that's a topic we'll dive deeper into later today. Yeah.
So just briefly, if people don't know, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Ola, there are two major parties and about 5 minor parties within the German parliament. Is that correct?
Yes. So historically, the oldest party in Germany are the Social Democrats. They've existed since the German Republic that was initiated after the First World War. And then the second largest, or the second large party, is the Conservative Party. And those two historically have always been the parties who won the elections, and the chancellors have always been either conservative or social democrats. We've got some smaller parties like left, green, liberal, and in the past few years, we've had a rapid increase of popularity within a, quite right-wing party. It didn't start out as a right-wing party. It started out as a, I would also say liberal economy-focused party that was founded by a lot of economical scientists. But the party was taken over by a lot of right-wing people who were trying to, make their policies popular again, or deceive them among other um, policies that the AfD, the AfD, stands for. So a few years ago, that party made a pretty hard move to the right and is now quite successful. So I believe on the federal level, they're around 19% in current polls. It's very likely that they will probably be able to be the second strongest party in the next election. So
Really?
yeah, because the Social Democrats are so unpopular right now. The current chancellor, Olaf Scholz, he's very unpopular. He's a Social Democrat, and I believe that's hurting the Social Democrats a lot. So in current polls, they're not very successful. I believe they're somewhere around 14, 15%. Um, yeah. Yeah, but basically, those were the two historical large parties, and they would then team up with the smaller ones in a coalition, or we called it the Great Coalition between conservatives and social democrats. That was in power for several years as well.
Yeah. So
But the next,
your conservative party is basically a right leaning moderate party, and your social democrats are also like a left leaning moderate party. Is that correct?
um, I'm I don't want to go as far as to making it that simple. So every party still has like internal wings that stand for different topics. So the Conservative Party has a more radical wing, right? That's very conservative, but they also have some more social, um,
Okay.
candidates. And but in general, I would say yes. Overall, Social Democrats more leaning to the left. Conservatives, especially in the last 2 or 3 years, where we've had a coalition of Social Democrats, Green Party, and the Liberals.
Sure.
The Conservatives moved to the right quite strongly again, because they thought they could take the votes away from the AfD, from the right wing party, which did not succeed. Like
Okay.
every single time in history, but who could
Yeah,
have known?
and very briefly, AFD is they're essentially a far right party, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
They will say they're not, but several of their members are by according to judges in Germany, it's rightful to call several members fascists,
Mm.
and the German Inland Secret Service is actually I think like 14 of the 16 state parties of the state parties are actually deemed right extremist, and therefore the Secret Service is actually spying on them basically officially. Because the Secret Service says they're against the democracy, they want to destroy our democracy. They officially say so. They say stuff like, kill every foreigner that comes to our border, stuff like that. Send everyone away who's not German. One politician from the AfD was just demanding that there should be DNA tests for every German to make sure they're actually German and don't have any foreign blood in their history, stuff like that. I believe we can safely call that far right, like very far right. Yes.
Sure.
So I'm curious to say, so from what you're explaining to me, what in my head it looks like parallel to us is, within the Democratic and Republican parties in our federal politics, you have different caucuses. So you have like the Progressive Caucus in the Democratic wing of the federal government, and then you also have like the MAGA, or the MAGA
Freedom Caucus.
Freedom Caucus, yeah, uh, you know much more tight knit with Donald Trump and kind of his policies and his visions and things. So I guess I'm just curious, like we have some independence within, our registered independence within our federal system, but they caucus with a specific party. However, it's always interesting to me when I hear that, there are two major parties in other countries, but then several different smaller parties within the federal government. But it sounds like they build coalition to get things done. With our federal system, it's always gridlocked. It seems like there's always a slim majority of each party to get the bills or laws that they want passed. How is like the bipartisanship within German policies or politics at the federal level? Like, are you guys in a gridlock system? Is it also extremely difficult to get legislation through?
Um, I I would say the key word here is compromise. Um, I think one of the biggest differences in the real life policy between Germany and the USA is that obviously no single party here can force their way. No one is big enough to force any laws, and it's been like that for decades now. So I believe this is one of the strengths of the German system, whereas the system, I guess, itself is not that different, but just for reasons turns out to yeah, be lived in different ways. Um, I believe the strength of the German system is that a coalition will always have to find a compromise. You will always try to make a majority, how big or small it is, or however big or small it is. Um, you will try to make those people happy, and it's unlikely that a following government will completely abolish that law because it does represent, yeah, different interest groups within the population, and it's not just one type of people that a law is addressing. And so I think even though the steps that we take forward are not as drastically, because no party can force too much, I believe it's still good because, at least from afar, what I'm sometimes reading on the news and so on, in the US, it seems like the Democrats pass a law, the Republicans come in power, abolish everything that the Democrats have done, and then it's just the same over and over again. And to me, sometimes it feels like, okay, where do you want to end up with doing that, right? You always take a step, and then 4 or 5 years later, you take a step back, and then what? It still, yeah, seems a little bit like a stalemate.
Hmm.
And that's one thing I actually like about the German system. Obviously, yeah, it means that no one will ever fully get what they hope for, and what they hope that their party would do if they win. Because even if, for example, the Social Democrats won the last election, it doesn't mean that they can do everything the Social Democrats wanted. Because, for example, the Liberals said, no, not with us. We're not going down that road. Yeah, and so it's baby steps, but at least it's going forward, I think, most of the time.
So if I'm not mistaken, you get seats in your parliament via proportional vote, correct? Like if your you vote for your parties, and if your party hits like 5%, then you can start getting seats based on performance after that. Is that correct?
Um, Pretty much, yes. There's one little extra detail. I can explain it. So the first thing is, yes, we've got that 5% quota. If a party is below 5%, they will not end up in the parliament, and all the seats will just be given to the parties who made it above 5%. And then also within every county in Germany, and we've got hundreds of counties, obviously, um, a candidate can be directly voted for. So you have one vote for a direct candidate and the vote for the party. And if a party has more direct candidates that win the vote in their county, then the to still keep the relative percentages of the popular vote that the parties got, we vary the size of seats in the parliament to still represent that, right? So, for example, the I don't know, some small party won quite a lot of counties, even though the party itself didn't get a lot of votes. They still have to be represented because the direct candidates made it in, and so there will be more seats in the parliament. So the other parties will have even more seats to get the correct proportion again.
I just want to back up a little bit. You said that there was a candidate or a politician being, investigated by your guys' like Homeland Security or Secret Service because he made statements of like suggesting blood purity tests.
Is the whole party.
Yeah, it's the whole party. So
that sounds very like
yes, it's exactly what you think. I can't believe. So currently there was finally the German parties got together, and politicians from pretty much every party in the government or in the parliament, not just the government, in the parliament, voted to ban that party. So now there will be a long process where courts will check if the party is actually against democracy and so on. It could be that they will be banned, but I don't know if that's. I mean, personally, I would support that. However, I'm afraid it doesn't change the minds of the people who vote for that party currently, right?
Yeah.
There's many people we just lost in the last few years to democracy, I believe. I am genuinely worried we cannot get them back. However, to get back to your initial point, so I just want to make sure. So the party itself doesn't officially say that, but for example, one lady, one politician from the AfD, she recently asked for those DNA tests. Not officially, but there was a meeting and some, how do you call it, investigative journalists joined
investigative
that
journalist.
meeting. Yeah. And so we've got the audio files of what was said, and she actually demanded that. But that one guy who can be legally called a fascist, because I believe 2 courts now have said yes, it's correct. He's fulfilling every aspect. He's also on a state level in one of the German states, East German states. We should probably also note that because that party is especially strong in the former East German states. Interestingly enough, because I mentioned that sometimes it's wiser for a politician to remain on the state policy and not move up to the federal level, seems to be the same for him. So he is very, very strong among the AfD in that state. He's a very influential political figure within that party, but he doesn't make the step to federal level, which is interesting. And you might speculate that maybe he's afraid that on a federal level, he can't really say the things he is saying now because the federal party seems to be a little more careful in what they're saying publicly, and they still want to remain they want to remain the impression that they're a democratic party, and that they don't want to bring back the Third Reich. So maybe they would try to cut him loose or cut him off. So maybe that's why he's remaining on the state policy level. So
in summary, in Germany, this party has been under investigation for being fascist, and they're currently in the process of banning this political party. Yeah.
More or less.
Okay.
Not fascist, but right extremism is what they're what they're saying, what the Secret
Okay.
Service, Homeland Security, whatever you want to call it.
Okay.
That's what they're saying. The Federal Party has not been accused of that so far. Only the state organizations and the youth organizations of that party. And also that request to ban the party by a lot of parliamentarians. No, how do you call the people on the parliament?
We call them representatives here, but I guess
representatives. Yeah,
to borrow from the UK, if you don't mind, member of parliament.
Yes, member of parliament. Yes, thank you. Okay, I like that term more. So that request is currently being checked, and it will go through several legal checks and so on. Several courts will surely have to have a look at it. It's not an easy process, but I think it's also the right thing to do. Many politicians say, "Hey, if we try to ban them and it doesn't succeed, then it only makes them stronger." But I also think the creators of our constitutions installed that option for a reason, because they knew how the Nazis got in power, and it was unfortunately and worryingly enough a very similar manner. They also did it in a more or less democratic way. They also more or less actually won an election. So I think this is something where the democracy just has to defend itself, and we will see if that tool will be used against them or not.
So you did mention earlier that you guys are also heading into a election season, or are currently in the middle of an election season, and will be electing, some new representation here soon. I'm just curious, how does your guys' media cover your elections? Because ours is very, clickbait, hot button issue, like the news cycle in America is just wild. And then social media amplifies that. So I feel like everybody tunes into American politics and sees what's going on because of the way we cover it. How are elections in Germany covered? I mean, are they similar to the way we do things here?
I believe the word clickbait can very much be applied to the media landscape here as well. I think there's one actually interesting aspect that you just mentioned: social media. Unfortunately, I personally believe that many Germans are very unwilling to accept change and just in general accept that the world is changing, life is changing all the time. It never will. It will never stop. But many just want that comfort of knowing, hey, I came to that point. It's comfortable right now, and I want it to remain that way. And so, unfortunately, Germany is not very, how can I put it? It's not very invested in anything related to the digital world, the internet, and especially not how information is being spread and used. And how we can use what side of an information you choose to spread, and which side you choose not to spread. How you can use that to advance your cause. And it's actually very interesting because of all the German parties that are currently in the parliament, the AfD, that right-wing party, is massively overrepresented on social media. That party has followers. I don't know the exact number, but it's like they've got 1 million followers. The Conservative Party, which most of the time ruled in Germany, they've got like 50,000. It's just no party is even active on social media. Only that right-wing party is. And they're really addressing issues to get those young people on social media, TikTok and so on, to, just, I don't know, they're not being presented with any alternatives. The AfD just says, hey, do you have that problem too? Well, we've got the solution, right? And it's the only thing they hear. They swipe through their For You page all day, and it's the only message they see. And it's a massive problem. And I believe this is one of the issues that the AfD actually understood. Hey, the future lies in different types of media today. And we don't care what any newspaper writes about us. We don't care what some big media outlet says about us, because it's not what gets to the people, right?
That's
Um,
extremely
It
fascinating
sounds
because
familiar, right, Jazari?
we talked about how that was here in this election cycle. I mean,
uh,
if you're on Twitter, you know that Elon Musk bought it and renamed it X and used it to spew so much information to an audience that is so invested in that social media platform and doesn't pay attention to any other media outlets. You know, he was able to control the narrative of this election cycle and amplify voices to spread one message over the other and to like stifle other people's voices. Also, as well as, you know, that, I mean, talking about like different media mediums on social media, we have different podcasts and things like that. So now we're at the age where we have to have presidential candidates go on, you know, this podcast to be able to speak with black men, or this podcast to speak with white young women, or this podcast to speak with, you know, Latino communities or Asian communities or whatever. You know, you have to, you know, spread out to different channels to be able to get your message out there. And the Republican Party here, the Conservative Party, and you know Trump's supporters, a part of the Freedom Caucus or those supporters, have mastered that as well. You know, they don't go onto conservative media anymore to break news. When Ron DeSantis, the governor of Florida, announced his presidential run, he announced on Twitter with Elon Musk on like a on the audio platform on there. So they have found ways to reach different audiences too. And I've also heard that in France, the Conservative Party of France, uh, who's that young guy who almost became the prime minister had they won in that snap election?
No,
Anyway,
I think
he's
Le
on Twitter.
Pen.
Marine
Marie Le
Le Pen.
Pen.
It's a
Not
lady,
Marie.
but yeah,
No, the kid
no,
that's dating her niece, that's, you know, kind of under her wing, her successor, her anointed successor.
okay.
I found his name, Jordan Bardella. So he's like pretty popular on TikTok. You know, he is the president of the National Rally Party of France, which is, you know, their equivalent of like the Conservative Party in America, or you know, the far right party in Germany. So yeah, we were talking about social media, you know, being wielded for power and, you know, being able to control the narrative and drive people to the polls. And the funny thing is, you know, they talk about how Trump was able to tap into young men. He went on all these podcasts, you know, to talk about UFC fighting or this or that, or things that, you know, young men or men like talk about or are interested in, and was able to captivate this audience through going on podcasts and social media. So, wow. You know, it's becoming a powerful
Um,
tool. It's becoming a powerful tool to win elections and reach people.
and if I may interrupt you there, very interesting twist from a few days ago. Elon Musk actually posted on Twitter that only the AfD can save Germany. So there you go.
He's starting. He's coming for you
He's
guys
doing
next.
the same thing,
Yeah.
How
right?
how was it? I was just gonna say, like, how was it to see how the American election was influenced because of that? I mean, what were you guys thinking, or if you guys even paid attention?
I mean, we do definitely pay attention. I guess historically, since World War II, America obviously has been a huge influence on our country in many different aspects. So obviously, also American yeah, politics are very much broadly covered among our news, at least on a federal level. Um, well, I mean, most Germans obviously hoped that, yeah, a different candidate would win the election.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, at least the media that I consume, which is public news, and yeah, a few independent channels, but I actually am very supportive of the German public radio and TV. I think they're doing a very professional work most of the time. Um, and they were also discussing that, right? So how do you get the masses interested in a certain topic? How do you get their emotions up?
Mhm.
Yeah, and I think it's a very worrying development that we can see in the United States, and I feel like whatever happens in the US in a fairly similar shape or form happens in Germany a few years or decades later. So I am afraid that in a few years we will have very similar issues. We just talked about it. It's already starting. Maybe the one thing protecting us is actually us being so digitally absent. So the biggest group of voters is seniors, and they just don't consume any of that stuff. So as long as that group of the population still votes for the conservative or social democrats, as they've done their entire life, I think the far right will not win an election or will not gain participation in a government. But I think the road that we're on currently might lead to that party winning at some point, simply because they are attracting younger generations and they just have to play the waiting game. As soon as that part of the population is the majority, which is a biological, natural, yeah, development. Um, yeah, it's,
Very interesting stuff. Wow.
they have a
So
realistic
I
chance.
I want to talk about Ukraine now. And I'm gonna kind of build this up a little bit. So 2014 happens. Russia invades Ukraine. They take Crimea, right? And the international response wasn't like, let's kick them out of Crimea. It was more of an appeasement. Would you say yes to Putin? Okay. So I would say that the Europeans did not see Trump coming. I didn't see Trump coming in that time. And I feel like when it happened, it was quite the shocker for European leadership. And so they get through the 4 years with Trump, but then they immediately stick their headset in the sand again, and they say, "Well, Biden wins. We're done with Trump. We don't have to worry about that." Would you say that's sort of accurate? Okay, so now that he has won again, just based on what I can tell from Europe, it looks like European leadership is actually waking up to the idea that the United States may not be a consistent ally going forward. Would you say yes?
Not 100%. I would say parts of Europe are waking up. Um, there are some prominent examples like Poland, which is brave enough to, yeah, make very clear statements about what democracy is to them, what they value in it, and what they're willing to do to defend it. Not just with weapons. I'm not talking about military stuff. Also like policies and so on. Um, Unfortunately, I'm afraid that not every country in Europe has understood
Mm-hmm.
that yet. There are more and more countries who realize things are changing and that this does not only have to worry us, but might also be a chance, and that it's time to take responsibility. But yeah, then like I said, like you can pretty much compare it to what I just said about Germans being a little lazy, as in if something is running well, they don't want to change it. They just want to live in that comfortable life. Um,
Don't break it
and
if
I
it's, or
believe,
don't fix it if it's not broken. That's what we
right?
say.
Uh, yeah. So I believe more and more countries and more people in Europe realize that maybe change is inevitable And if we don't want change to dictate our lives in the future, then maybe we should dictate what changes we want in this world. Which sounded a lot more, well, it sounds kind of wrong now that I hear myself saying it, but I hope you know
So,
what I mean.
from what I understand, Europe is trending towards being able to increase their own domestic production for weapons. Is that correct? They're just not there right now. They're sort of exhausted, but they know in the future GDP spending for military and military production. They understand that Europe is going to have to eventually get self sufficient. Correct?
I'm not 100% sure if politicians understood that the goal has to be that we're self-sufficient. However, I think that across the board, many politicians support the idea of increasing defense budgets. I wouldn't go as far as to saying that they want to completely plan for a scenario where the United States are not an ally anymore, or at least not act like one. However, I think it has reached most countries and most parties that this is something that's in everyone's interest. And so currently, I would say that change was initiated, and we will see more of it throughout the next years.
Okay. So the sentiment I kind of gather is that Europe is ready for the Russian-Ukrainian war to be done. Correct? Like they want some time. They want the conflict to wind down and be done and over with. Is that correct?
I don't know the current polls, at least not for Germany. But I believe that the majority still supports us not giving up Ukraine, as in the Ukraine has to remain as a nation, and that the Ukraine also should not give up any territories. However, I'm afraid there's still a lot of people who don't really want to invest more than is absolutely necessary. And I think many people in Germany, at least, are misjudging how this conflict is already affecting the rest of Europe, how this might affect whether future conflicts arise or not. Our current behavior, well, shows other countries in the world how far can they go, how far can they push things. Is the Western world as a whole ready to actually stand by what they're saying? Are they actually willing to also take measures that hurt ourselves, but that maybe have to be taken because we want to defend certain things that we just don't want to give up upon, don't want to give up on.
So if the United States stopped
Yeah,
supporting Ukraine in the way that it's been doing, like all defensive aid it just shuts off in the next few months, would Europe would they have the capacity to keep supporting the defense of Ukraine, and two, is the will there?
I think we only have to ask that one question. Actually, is the will there? I think it's not a question of economy. I believe the European economy is more than capable, if Europe actually stood together and actually wanted to help and wanted to decide this conflict. To me, it only comes down to the question: do Europeans want to maybe Europeans don't want to force a certain outcome, but maybe they want to at least make sure that some scenarios do not happen, as in Russia actually having a military victory over the Ukraine. It's I believe it's too complex and too vague to actually speak for
Sure.
the entire continent. Obviously, personally, I say we have to do a lot more. If we don't fully invest now, then maybe Russia, maybe other countries will initiate wars in the future because they saw us again not acting upon it, not responding to aggression,
Appeasing.
and
Yeah.
yeah. So that's
I guess the last
appeasing.
question I have in mind for now is, so people think that, I mean, and it's actually quite quite controversial here that the war in Ukraine, continue support of the war in Ukraine, and it's unpopular. We think that in the coming months, the incoming Trump administration, is going to shut off most, if not all, of defensive aid to Ukraine. So one of the things that has kind of been discussed is, well, okay, so how do we facilitate peace talks? And our military leaders actually believe that because of the stalemate, Ukraine seriously needs to consider ceding territory to Russia in part of a peace talks deal. So, I mean, like, what would on a personal level, like, what do you think about, ending the war by making a major concession like that? Would you support that? Would you be completely against that?
If it's okay, if we have the time, can I maybe comment on your first part about
Sure.
Trump cutting support first? Because I think that that's also the general public opinion here, that everyone expects Trump to cut any support. I think there's actually another interesting narrative that is being discussed by several people on YouTube and so on who focus on like geopolitics. And one interesting narrative that I'm thinking about, because I didn't really come to think of it, is that Trump is actually not going to cut off support because it's not in his interest. The fact that Biden just passed a huge, a huge package of support for the Ukraine, huge military aids. According to Biden, that was decided upon with Trump, and I think the interesting assumption here is Trump wants to be the person who makes good, successful deals. Trump wants to end the war, and he wants to be known in history as the person who ended that war without the Western world being on the weaker side. But we can only get into that position if the Ukraine has the upper hand within that conflict. Meaning, it's only in Trump's best interest to first give a huge boost to the Ukraine's military capabilities so that the Ukraine can actually get to a point where the Russian Federation has to admit we cannot gain anything here. It will feel like a loss to the Russian Federation, which might lead to other scenarios, but that's not the question right now. But I actually am not sure if Trump is actually going to end support for Ukraine. I think many people here are preparing for that scenario. That's also why many European countries are, increasing military production and so on, or also defense budgets. But personally, I find that narrative very interesting, and I could see how that is plausible. Obviously, the time will tell. Trump seems to be somewhat difficult to judge what decisions he makes, and I think at least to me he's not very predictable. But I could see how to get into that position of being the one who ends that war with Ukraine not losing. He has to support and understands that he has to support Ukraine more. So that just as a commentary to your first part. Second part, my personal opinion on whether the Ukraine should, in some shape or form, make concessions. I think is what you said, right? It's difficult. On the one side, I say we can. The most important part is that whatever the outcome is, it has to feel like a loss to the people of Russia. That's what I think is the most important bit. I don't know what exactly would feel like a loss to the Russians, but I believe that that is the only way that we can stop the Russian population not standing up against their leader if he decided to, for example, test NATO by invading some wetland in Finland or some forest in the Baltic countries. I think, and that's officially what the German armed forces are planning with. They do expect an attack on NATO territory. Personally, I would expect that it's to an extent where it's again he's crossing a red line, but not so massively that we still have the option to say, it's just an uninhabited forest. Just let it be. We're not risking a world war over it. But that's sorry for actually bringing up a Hitler comparison here. But to me, it is very much
Sudetenland.
like that, right? Hitler pushed more and
appeasement.
more, and it's
Neville Chamberlain.
and it's a piece of exactly. So it's history all over again, and to me, maybe I'm just not educated enough to see the differences that actually might be meaningful. But to me, it seems so similar, and I don't understand why people still think appeasement would lead to peace. I don't get it, and that narrative is just.
I understand.
I don't understand. However, one interesting piece that I also picked up on that one YouTube channel that was also discussing that Trump piece on support for Ukraine, that Russia officially in official FSB documents, the Russian
yes,
Foreign Secret
their
Service,
intelligence agency, basically their CIA.
Basically CIA. So apparently they've got a doctrine,
rules,
how do you call it?
doctrine, policy.
Okay, policy, where they try to influence the minds of people, and it's been in place since the Soviet era. It's not a thing that Putin started or anything, but it's basically trying to stir up fear among the people. You know that Soviets back then and Russia today, they will use nuclear weapons, they will stop delivering oil and gas, all that stuff. And in that document, it actually says that the German population is especially easy to target.
Yeah.
Since they will just believe that. They're so afraid to lose that comfortable
life
spot in life that they have, that they will give in to that fear and just say, hey, I will accept everything as long as here in Germany, as long as my house here in some German village is fine, I make money, I can provide for my family, everything's good for me. And it drives me insane because it used to work in the past more or less, and it feels like it is working now. Like I've got colleagues who actually give into that narrative and who say, yeah, well, the Russian economy can't be beaten, and they still have thousands of tanks in some depots, and the sanctions didn't help. And you don't even have to do deep research to see that is not true. I mean, it's just not true. The latest sign of breakdown to me is that the interest rates in Russia on government participation, or I don't know the English words for it, is at like 28.5%, basically meaning no company in the Russian Federation can take up loans
Yeah.
anymore because they're so expensive, which means the economy is at a dead end. And stuff like that, and so much other proof that we have that the Russian military just sucks so hard. They have to get support from North Korea, one of the shittiest and least equipped militaries in the world, and it's drives me insane. But yeah, so that is a narrative that many Germans are still afraid of, and especially the AfD, that right wing party. They're also pro Russia. So I don't know how do you. There's a term for when you have like an institution outside of your own country that is basically promoting your
Propaganda,
truth
lobbyists,
and
useful
your
idiots.
policy.
Propaganda. Yeah.
It's like
Sympathizer.
fifth. Yeah, it doesn't matter. Yeah, but
Sympathizer.
basically, no, but basically, it's the propaganda, right? They're spreading the Russian propaganda. They spread that fear here. They say, "Hey, we can't win anyway. Let's give up
Yeah.
now."
Here
And
in the
it's
United
just,
States, the really
yeah,
popular propaganda that is clearly from Russian origins that seems to be really taking up the right wing spheres is that, oh, we're going to have a nuclear war. If we continue, we're going to have a nuclear war. And my only reaction is, oh, yeah, Russia will use a nuke if they all want to die. Like, yeah, sure, most of Europe would be decimated, but Russia would be wiped off. I mean, Putin's not that stupid.
Yeah, I mean, there's not really any winners in a
But Russia
nuclear
would
war like
definitely be
that.
100% loser. Like maybe plenty of Europe gets destroyed too, but Russia will be completely destroyed. It's just like, yeah, sure, yeah, nuclear war. They'll totally use a nuke if they all want to die. Like, sure. But yeah, Americans are eating it up. Americans are eating up this idea that we're headed for nuclear war and that, oh my God, save the children and stuff. And it's just like, this is literally a Russian talking point.
Seems
This
like
is
every
literally a
week.
Russian talking point. It's coming from Russia's propaganda sphere. So
yeah.
It seems like every week nuclear war is trending on Twitter, and people share their memes, their clips, their funny videos of me getting woken up at 3 a.m. to go fight in the nuclear war, and I mean, I feel like in a way we're kind of desensitized to like a lot of stuff. I mean, here in America, we've just entered a new era of political violence and violent rhetoric and things to the point where it's kind of just like.
Well, I disagree a little because we fought a civil war. Yeah, we're not in a new era of political violence. Like, I mean, we've been worse off. We literally fought a civil war.
I mean, I'm not discounting like what that happened. I'm not saying the era we're in is more dangerous than that. I'm saying we're entering into a new
it's a new time for sure.
Of like things being.
I mean, when I hear people,
it's just because it's a new era doesn't mean it was worse than what previously happened.
And this is not what you were saying. It's probably me just projecting. But so many people I know who are liberals will say we've never been more divided. We've never been more. Never in our country have we been more divided. And I'm just like, we had a war. we had a civil war. Like, what are you talking about? And then also everybody talks about how we're going to have a civil war today. And it's just like, okay, who's fighting this war? You think the American military is going to fight itself? You think some National Guards from different states are going to? No. Like, it's just, I'm sorry. It's just ridiculous. I think it's more propaganda. I don't know.
Yeah. I do want to talk about something else. You earlier on you touched on immigration and how the AfD is against racial integration or things like that, or people coming into the country. I'm just curious because that's a huge talking point, right? That's one thing that won Trump this election. Mass deportations, getting people out. Here in the U.S., we rely heavily on undocumented migrants to do laborious jobs that Americans don't deem desirable. Working on in meat packing plants, working in on farms, things like that, like low level skill jobs that most Americans are not out seeking. Um, to kind of parallel on that, how does Germany address racial or ethnic diversity within the country? I mean, what does that look like within German politics and everyday life?
Um, First of all, I think I have to start by saying that Germany, compared to the United States, is not very diverse. To you, it's normal, right? You've got so many ethnicities, religions, everyone living together, working together. Um, I think you just have to know that in Germany, the vast majority of the population is old white people. Um, that's not something good, right? um, but I think Germans did not have many occasions in history yet to really learn how to integrate foreigners on a large scale. And I mean, there is that human instinct to be afraid of new things and change. Yeah, you initially view it as a threat, and I think I mean, now in modern times, obviously we should be able to overcome that and say, hey, this is a chance and not a threat. Um, I think this also is pretty much explaining the German policy on immigration. Um, I mean, there's different kinds of migration, right? So you've got people that come here with a visa, they work here and so on, and that part is already difficult for everyone coming here because German bureaucracy just makes it so difficult that Germany is actually one of the least popular countries for educated people to come here and work here. Um, that's the German issue. We just I don't know for reasons we've got huge bureaucracy in every aspect of life, and it's suffocating a lot of changes within the society. Um, then you've got refugees. The most prominent migration wave being the Syrian refugees in 2015, 2016. And now the refugees from Ukraine since the beginning of the war, since the beginning of the full-scale war. Um, well, unfortunately, the German law on how to handle refugees, for example, I believe is it's probably the biggest reason why we even have those, why many Germans have negative thoughts on immigration. The thing is that we basically put up those container villages, what we call them, build a fence around it, and then the refugees wait there until their refugee status is either accepted or denied.
Refugee camps, you
But
mean?
yeah, basically, I mean, it's not like in other countries of the world, like they have a roof over their head and water and food and everything, but still, it's a parallel society. They're only among themselves. There's no integration. They're not allowed to work until their refugee status is decided. And it's just, we are the ones who create the problem, is my opinion, right?
Mm.
We never actually tried to integrate anyone into our society. And yet people say we failed. Those people have to go, right? It's been so many years and they're not integrated. Send them away. Well, we never gave them a chance. So how can you say those people didn't try hard enough? We never gave them the straw to try in the first place. Um, yeah, and I think that's an important change that has to happen, and actually it's being discussed currently. that we also allow people who apply as a refugee and try to come here under the basically the human rights conventions, that they are allowed to work here, that they can try to build a life here. And obviously, that's one of the most important ways to become a part of the society, right? That you have a job, you interact with the people, you learn the language, you learn about the culture. And how would people learn all of that if they're just barred
Hmm.
behind a fence, living
Mm,
in a container for years? And
mm,
so many people are against immigrants, especially refugees. The typical narrative of, yeah, they just cost so much money and blah blah blah, which is obviously bullshit.
It's fine.
Sorry, it's
you're okay.
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 um,
Yeah, I was
yeah,
just curious because I'm South Sudanese. Well, Sudanese, South Sudanese, since they split in 2011. So I just know that there was a second Sudanese. This is crazy. There was a second Sudanese civil war from 1983 to 2005. And during that time, you had a lot of people who were displaced. You had the Lost Boys who came to America, some South Sudanese people who I'm sure my family knows are in Germany, albeit in a very, very small community or number. And then there was also the South Sudanese Civil War, that started 2 years after they became an independent sovereign nation from 2013 to 2018, that led another displacement of South Sudanese refugees who fled to Germany. So I was kind of just curious, and I have a friend who recently went to Germany, I believe it was, and he loved it. He thought Germany was very beautiful, nice, like loved the architecture, the history, the people, all of that, and said there were pockets of communities here and there, like their own Chinatown, this specific community, all kind of just in their own like spot together. So makes sense what you said. The lack of integration throughout the years for people who have been there for a while. So I was just kind of curious on how that paralleled with America, because before, America used to be, seen as a melting pot. And even Americans, used to say, we're a melting pot, the best and brightest come here. And, we're mixed of different cultures and races and identities to make a strong, nation. But now it's become a talking point of, immigrants are poisoning the blood of our country. That's a talking point that Trump had and amplified, and you start seeing just mass deportations and people wanting, immigrants out of the country, even though they are a huge part of the American economy and what makes day to day life function here. So yeah, thank you for that
So,
insight.
I mean, my thought is it just feels like the entire Western or developed world, whatever term you want to use, all of us just seem to be against immigration right now. My friends in Canada, my friends in Europe, everyone just seems to be against immigration right now. It feels like a shut it all down, and so we can have time to figure it out, sort of thing. But I mean, I do want to put it into perspective. After the Syrian civil war displaced all of those Syrians in 2015, Germany took in like 1 million refugees within a year. Right? Does that sound right? Now, that might not seem like a lot, but the German population at the time was only in the low 80 millions. So it would be like in the United States, an equivalent would be if within a 1 year period we suddenly had 4 million Syrian refugees. We took them in within a year. Um, I mean, we can't even handle a few 100,000 a year, So, I mean, I do understand some of the social unrest it created because that is kind of a huge influx all of a sudden, and I do know that there's going to be like cultural clashes and assimilation is going to be very difficult and stuff. But I mean, it just seems like our political leaders have not been able to handle immigration in the last 10 years, and everybody just seems to be against it right now. Like, even in Canada, that is also a very immigrant oriented nation, they want to shut off their immigration as well. So, that's my thoughts on there.
Yeah, there's also and to piggyback off of that, taking in a huge influx of people, there are huge costs associated with that. Interpretation services, school education services for people who don't know English and having to have dedicated teachers and stuff. I worked as a long term substitute for what we call ESL, so English as a second language for immigrant children who came over, and having to be able to provide that service. And it can even be even more difficult in smaller, more rural areas where if you have an influx of Syrian immigrants who speak only Arabic or other languages, and needing to find the services to be able to help those people with just communication.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I mean, I guess the only go ahead.
Yeah,
Give us your thoughts. Sorry.
I mean, yes, it's a fact that does cost money. Obviously, I think it would be naive to deny that. However, I also think that most immigrants, I mean, they do, if we actually integrate them into our society, right? I mean, it takes a few years, obviously. Language classes, they maybe have to learn a profession because, yeah, the work environment, the business environment is just different in Germany. Yeah, okay. But in the end, I mean, most of the time it's young men coming here. At least that's the case for the Arabic refugees. Um, and so I'm thinking, hey, they come here at an age where they still have a lot of work life ahead of them. And so far, they've grown to become adults, and we did not spend a single euro on them. If you want to get a German to work, you have to pay for 12 years of school, 5 years of university, all the social services that Germany offers, the healthcare system, and it costs hundreds of thousands of euros. I'm sure. I don't know if have the number, but I'm sure it's super expensive to get one German citizen to the stage where they enter work life. And to have someone come in your country, and you maybe need 3 or 4 years to actually integrate them, but from then on, they have a job, they pay taxes. To me, it seems, my gut feeling at least tells me that this has to pay off at some point. If they stay in the
yeah,
country and keep working and keep paying taxes, it's much cheaper than having a German doing it. Because the German costs you money for 20, 25 years without paying taxes. So I don't really, I mean, yeah, okay, not every immigrant is going to be a doctor, an engineer, but that's also not the only jobs we have to fill. I mean, I think like in many developed countries, the biggest gaps that we have to fill are the jobs with lower qualifications, right? No one wants to deliver packages anymore. No one wants to cook in a restaurant. It's very hard to find people who are willing to work in those jobs here in Germany, because since education is free for the most part, we don't have stuff like student loans that basically yeah, make you question the entire choice going to university anyway. So most people use the opportunity. Most people who can will do or will take a very long education, because it will pay. Yeah, it will pay off for them, and so yeah, it just takes a very long time, and I feel like, yeah, if Germans then with that qualification are also not willing to work in a job where no qualification is needed, and they basically waste what they've studied for years. I can also relate with that. Yeah, then we need someone else to do it. And
it's
I mean,
yeah. I mean, it's
it's,
wild. I think that. Uh, Go ahead. Go ahead. Didn't mean to cut you off.
no, yeah, I don't mean to sound condescending or anything. It's just, if there are currently people coming here and they're willing to take those jobs, because for them it's still a big improvement, even though maybe it's not what they dreamed of for their life or for their children, but at least for the next few years, for the foreseeable future, it's what they will do because it has to be done. And it will improve their quality of life drastically. And I feel like, shouldn't we invest what's needed to integrate them? And I mean, you can already also see it. Like we have a few cities in Germany that had more contact with other cultures. For example, Hamburg, which is a big city in the north of Germany, and you can really tell because of the sea trade. Historically, Hamburg has always been very open to other cultures, right? Very tolerant, and you can see how the city had a lot of benefits from it. And I feel like, of course, there's going to be issues. Of course, there will be conflict. But to be honest, I also have a lot of conflicts with some Germans, real Germans, however they want to call themselves. I'd rather have the Syrian refugee who's for now only speaking Arabic, but who's willing to build a new life and to contribute to society. Um, yeah, so I don't know. I mean, our constitution also says, every human has the same worth. There's no difference in races or religions, and it's we're not allowed to judge a person based on ethnicity or something like that. So to me, everyone who says, yeah, well, those foreigners, they should stay where they are. We only want those white, questionable people in our country. Well, I don't want that, right?
I agree. I think that definitely does help too. And Elon Musk is kind of saying the quiet part out loud of what their whole plan was with the H-1B visas, bringing in highly skilled individuals to work these white collar tech jobs at, Tesla, Google, all these places, because the government didn't have to invest in, all those years of education. K through 12, we have public education, but if you want to go to school, you either have to go to through scholarships or loans, or if your family has the means to just pay for it. There's not really a lot of government assistance when it comes to free education like that for Americans. College is very expensive. I mean, for my journalism degree, like start to finish, even though I jumped around a bit, it was like $35,000. But K through 12 education was free for me, because I went to public school. But I remember going to South Sudan for the first time and, not seeing a lot of people having the opportunities economically. And there is discussion to be had of, how the US meddles in other governments and things like that to kind of topple governments and economic opportunities for those citizens, which is a factor of people coming here searching for better opportunities. But yeah, I told my cousin about how even here there's some factory jobs that people are struggling to fill because nobody wants to go work in these factories with overtime opportunities. And he was like, "Wow, if that was here, you'd see Sudanese people in there day and night, unlimited overtime. Yeah, sign me up. I'll work 30 hours with no bathroom break because the opportunity is there. Why not seize on the opportunity?" And I think we become comfortable to our way of life here that we don't really grasp the things other people in other countries, whether it be war torn or economically, you know, challenging, what people will do for the opportunity to build a better life. The lengths people will go to be able to put food on the table for their family or a roof over their head. I don't think there's a lot of that pride. You know, yeah, I'll take on this job as a hotel cleaner because I'm going to be making money that I didn't have before. You know, and then people paying taxes, like you said, buying homes, investing in their future, building a life, and putting back into the country, putting back into the economy is a huge aspect of it too. Sorry, you're muted, Tommy.
Did I mute myself or did you mute me?
I muted you because I could hear you
Oh, I'm
typing.
sorry. I'm very sorry. I was just
But I
looking something
forgot.
up
But
about, I guess, fun fact, since it was mentioned, both the American government and the German government spend about 350,000 U.S. American on each child. So, I mean, that was a really excellent point that like somebody comes in, perhaps they don't know how to speak the language, but it takes just a little bit of investment to get them assimilated, and they're willing to work a job that needs to be worked. I never really thought about that from the economic perspective, but yeah, I mean, so we're kind of running over on time a little bit. I only had one more question in mind. Do you have any other questions, Zari?
Um, my only closing question was, what do you think Americans can learn from German policies and politics, and vice versa? You know, is there a page out of your book that we could take?
Oof. Um, well, I think one thing that I still don't really understand, how it came to that point, and why it still remains, is the fact that it feels like a party, or like a system of only two parties in the US. As I understand, there are different parties. It's just like no one votes for them because it feels like a wasted vote.
Yeah,
Is that correct? Um, yeah, to basically circle back to the beginning where I was talking about how a coalition will always have to try to find a compromise, and how even if it's just baby steps, at least you are moving forward. I don't really understand why Americans
I could
don't give that
explain.
a chance. Like, why do
I could
Americans not?
I
explain.
don't either.
It's it's
I agree
the
with
it's
you.
the
I
power
don't. I
in
don't agree.
belief,
I don't
really,
know.
because on paper, yes, you can vote for other parties and you can give other parties a chance, but you have in Germany you have a multi-member parliament proportional parliament like election system. We just have first past the post, and I know there is a little bit of that in Germany, but we have is pure first past the post. That means whoever gets the most votes wins. Doesn't mean they have doesn't like that could literally be 30%. If you're voting, if you're choosing between three or four parties, that could literally be 30% could win that seat. So in American culture, we're it's deeply ingrained in us that if you vote for a third party, your vote is like your vote is going to be wasted, because you're going to like your second preferred party is going to get fewer votes, but the party you don't like the most is going to win, even with like 30 or 40%. That's what we believe, and in we can debate whether that's that way in reality, but it's in our minds. That's what we believe is, if I go and vote for the Green Party, which some liberals do go vote for the Green Party, my vote is not going to count because the Democrats are going to lose. They're the ones I can stomach the most. And then the Republicans are going to win. So it's like we need to reform our system to be closer to better representation. We need to abolish first past the post and pass an alternative system where we get rid of what's called vote splitting. Where that's essentially the problem, is I feel like I'm splitting my vote if I don't vote for the Democrats and I vote for the Green Party, who has never won a seat in Congress. The Republicans are going to win no matter what, because I'm splitting my votes. It's the power of perception, but it might as well, it's so powerful in our heads, it might as well be true. And the solution is bringing in a different kind of electoral system. So, I mean, it's not very sexy. Nobody really talks about that, but that's why there's a two-party system. It's just very strong belief, you know. So,
Yeah, but belief can be changed, manipulated. We also talked about that social media. Yeah, maybe now's the time for those smaller parties to try and, yeah, bring up that idea to maybe have people in a few years or decades to actually vote differently, and maybe then people will see, oh, hey, it still works. Our country is not collapsing.
I mean, they
Yeah,
just don't want to
who
hear it.
knows?
Like the third-party people
Um,
don't want to hear that you need election reform before you get elected. They just want to, I tell them this, you need to push for election reform so you can actually have a chance of getting elected. And they're like, no, 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 it's fine. We're fine. We're the biggest growing party in 15 years or something like that. And it's just like, well, yeah, if you go from one member to 10, you've increased 1,000%, but that doesn't mean anything. It's just so infuriating to go talk to somebody who's in a third party and say, we need to work on perhaps ranked choice voting or approval voting or something. And they're just like, no, we're fine. We're fine. We don't have to change anything. We're going to win on our message. And it's just like, it's not them. You could be telling the right message. They're just going to look at your brand, and they believe so heavily that if they vote third party, the worst party is going to win. So
And we also have a problem of like gerrymandering and people being drawn into districts that lean, Democrat or
Mm.
Republican, which isolates out any
so
a competition. So
Yeah.
that's another huge problem. So I mean, like, could it be argued that the system is
it
rigged?
is in many ways. But I
It
only have
could,
one more
yeah.
question for Ola, and you can keep it brief. You don't. I'm sure you could write a book on this. But what's your reaction to Trump winning again? You know, are you surprised or?
Um, I was a little surprised. I mean, personally, I was hoping that Harris would win, but I never thought that her victory was certain. Like I always knew, okay, it's so close. Trump does have a real chance. Um, the fact that he will be in office soon again, on the one hand, obviously it's worrying. On the other hand, I do feel like this is a big chance for Europe. We touched on the topic of European independency and especially the questions of or matters of like defense. Um, I feel like this is an opportunity for Europe to actually come together and yeah, maybe not become completely irrelevant within the next 20 or 30 years. Um, yeah, so I am hoping that this finally is the wake up call that we've talked about earlier, that more Europeans will understand, hey, we were disappointed, yes, and uh, yes, it's tiring that we have to put in work now to change things, but it will pay off in the long term. It will be better, even if it's not better for like, me, my generation or older generations, but at least it will be for the coming generations. And to me, that is something worth investing time and work and money into. So yeah, I think I accepted it now, and I really hope that Europeans will yeah actually act on the responsibility that they always claim Europe still has in global politics. But maybe to also end on a positive note on my opinion on the United States. Um, while I do feel like this the current time with social media and yeah, well, a lot of things in life starting to feel a little manipulated by yeah, single interest groups. Um, I do think that the American nation, for several decades, if not centuries, managed to kind of understand that they have to, look into short-term, middle-term, long-term decisions. How does our own national policy affect us? How does foreign policy affect us? I think even though many decisions in the 20th century that the Americans have done um, might have been, just because it was in their own interest to have Europe being economically or militarily dependent on the United States. Yes, obviously it was in the American interest, but it was also still kind of in the European interest to be rebuilt with American money. Um, yeah, and I think it also paid off in the long term for the Americans. Europe is one of the biggest trade partners for the United States, and if we were a poor continent still bombed to the ground after World War II, you wouldn't have that trade partner. And so I think you did get all your investments back and much more on top of it. So I really hope that Americans will in the future again see that America first does not necessarily mean that you completely close your borders, stop interacting with everyone else just because it's complicated to start a dialogue, to actually approach other countries, other cultures, to try and understand each other. That can pay off. It's not going to pay off in a few days or weeks or months, but maybe in the long term. And yeah, I hope that for all of our sake, America will get back to that point again. And even if it's only so Americans get richer and richer again, I'm fine with that as long as the other side also profits. Why not? Then greed can at some points be an okay motivation if everyone wins, or most people at least. Yeah.
Awesome. Good stuff. Well, we really appreciate you coming on. Uh, Afternoon for us, evening for you, to chat about all these issues and give us more insight and perspective on German culture and society and how that parallels with American politics. So I've learned a lot from you, and it's been a great conversation. I've thoroughly enjoyed it.
Yeah,
Me
thanks.
too. Thank you so
Get
much.
some sleep. It's 9 o'clock there, I believe.
I will.
Yeah.
All right. It is. Okay.
Okay.
I have to take care of my daughter
Yep.
again.
Bye.
Have a
Okay.
good night, guys.